Einar believe the end only comes once you have fulfilled your purpose. It provides meaning.
So what was your purpose?
To fix what is broken.
Welcome to the General Order 1 podcast, where we are discussing the Star Trek Strange New Worlds television show. I'm joined by my longtime friend and fellow nerd, Ben.
Hello.
And today we are discussing Season 1, Episode 9, which is entitled All Those Who Wander. All right, well, let's dive right in. So the episode starts with the recap from, previous episodes, just catching us up on things we may have missed from the season. Normally I don't cover this, but it's actually very appropriate this time. It's worth noting that the recap is heavy on the Gorn and it's heavy on Hemmer. And there's one line that stands out I'm going to say now because it ties in later. Hemmer is talking about his purpose, and he says, the Einar believe the end only comes once you have fulfilled your purpose. It provides meaning. And Uhura asks him, what is your purpose? And Hemmer's response is, to fix what is broken.
Well, he went into the right career.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean...
A little on the nose, Hemmer.
When it first aired, or when I first saw the recap, I was like, clearly it's a good quote or a good motto for an engineer, but it actually ultimately ties into the later episode too. So
yeah,
it was kind of a two-handed sword. So what we see is that the
double-edged sword.
I know. I said that and I realized immediately it's stupid. You get the idea. It had two purposes. Let's put it that way.
I mean, you got the sword part right.
I'm 50,
and the two part right. I mean, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Well, that's like 66%. What do you want from me?
That's passing.
The episode starts with Uhura doing a voiceover. She makes mention that her assignment to the Enterprise, her training assignment, is over, and that she is going to be headed back to Earth soon, and that she's looking forward to seeing people on Earth. She says that the Enterprise's current mission is delivering Vidium power cells to Deep Space Station K7.
I've heard those are the best on the market.
The Vidium power cells?
Yeah, you want the Vidium ones.
Can you get them at Tashi Station?
Well, I mean, that's a different IP. I don't know. We'd have to talk to our lawyers first.
Uhura mentions that she's still trying to find her purpose in life. She's still trying to figure out what she wants to do. She does make mention that there are a lot of other people, a lot of other cadets on Enterprise, and that the Enterprise is their goal. It's kind of the flagship of the fleet, and that's where a lot of people are aiming. But this is definitely not her goal, is what she says. At least not at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah, we've kind of circled back a bit because she's touched on this before in some previous episodes about she's not really sure if this is, what path she wants to be on. And yeah, I got to say, every time she says this, the rest of the, anyone she's saying this to is often incredulous. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you don't know if you want to be here? Like, everybody is killing themselves in Starfleet to get here. And now, anyway, and Spock specifically calls her out and says, hey, if you aren't sure, you better step aside for someone who is, because there's 10, 20 people that would kill to be where you are right now.
Well, it's almost more like not only is she unsure, but she's kind of almost against it. Like,
yeah,
she's done her rotation on a lot of these positions, and she's talked to a lot of people, but she doesn't feel like she's made a lot of friends, and nothing really jumps out at her. So she's almost kind of repulsed. She's, like, all right, I did this. It wasn't my thing. I'm going to go do my own thing.
And she excels at everything. She's good at it all.
Yeah. Mike calls her a genius a couple times. Yeah. I mean, clearly.
Frankly, she's almost too good. It's like she's like the best at everything at this point. But, yeah, she's super competent and everybody's impressed with her. But yeah, at the same time, she's like, I don't know. Like, this is fine for you guys, but I don't know if this is for me.
Ultimately, the next thing we see is it's the inside of Pike's quarters, and he is congratulating Chia, who I don't think we've met before, and Uhura for completing their cadet training rotations. So he's having a little, congratulatory party saying, good job doing what you needed to do. There's also another gentleman there named Ensign Duke, and he gets promoted to lieutenant. And I don't believe we've seen Ensign Duke before.
No, I'm pretty sure both of these folks are new in this episode.
So Uhura has, let the crew know that she was not going to be staying on the Enterprise. Pike gives her one last little speech. He does tell her, I'm not going to give you the hard sell. He doesn't want to beat a dead horse, I think is what he says. But he does mention, he says, there will always be a place for you on the Enterprise. So he kind of softballs it to her and lets her know that, hey, we'd really like you to be here, but I'm not going to twist your arm.
Yeah, he's very understanding. And she doesn't come off, I think, as thinking, she's not radiating this energy of like Starfleet's dumb and you guys are dumb for being here. If she was dismissive of Starfleet, I think people would probably resent her. But it's more that she just isn't sure it's for her. So she's not going like, yeah, I don't know what the purpose of this is at all. She's like, I don't know what my purpose is here. I mean, I get that this is important and you guys are driven and you're doing good stuff. Just, I don't know if I belong.
She plays her cards pretty close to her vest. I mean, she lets the crew know that this isn't her thing, but I don't think she goes into detail with any. I don't get the impression at this point that she has any real close friends that she's confiding in and saying, hey, this just isn't really my thing.
Yeah.
In the middle of this celebration, Spock calls from, we presume, the bridge, and he mentions that they have a Priority 1 mission from Starfleet. And Una actually responds, aren't we already on a Priority 1 mission? So there's a little debate about, what happens when you have 2 Priority 1 missions comes in. There is, there's a brief mention, because La'an is missing, and Una actually says that La'an has scheduled some personal time and does not elaborate on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so right as they're about to walk out to go respond to whatever this Priority 1 mission is, like Pike is doing the dishes because they have just had dinner. And he hands Spock like the apron. I think I don't know if he puts it on him or whatever.
He just hands it to him and says, hey, take, someone, I can't remember who it is, questions him and says, hey, you're really going to be doing the dishes while we're doing this briefing? He says, I can do more than one thing at a time.
Right.
But then when it gets serious, he says, okay, well, hang on a sec. And he hands the apron to Spock and says, take over for me. Because I got to get into this briefing. This is a bigger deal than I thought it was going to be.
Ultimately, they determine that there is a ship called the USS Peregrine, and it activated a distress beacon about 4 days ago. There is mention, I think Ubenga mentions that it is a Sombra class ship, and that's a unique class of ship. I don't know anything about it, but it's worth mentioning that it is a unique style of ship. It's I don't know if that's going to come up later, but it is not a standard ship. So
he mentions that it's built from the same parts that Constitution class ships are built from. So
right,
it's similar to the Enterprise, but it sounds like it's a smaller ship, but it's of a similar quality to the Enterprise.
Is the Enterprise a Constitution class ship?
Yes.
I should know that, and I have no idea. Okay. So they make mention that they need to go on, essentially, they need to respond to this distress beacon. I think Pike has actually made mention before. I think they are required by Starfleet code or whatever to respond to all distress beacons. So they have to go on this mission to investigate what happened to the USS Peregrine, but they also make mention that they had those power cells for Deep Space Station K7. And the nature of those power cells is that they, I assume, only have a limited lifespan, and they cannot go on this distress call mission and then come back and deliver those power cells. They will be useless. Actually,
which is a little strange. Like, you'd think your power storage medium would last. Well, I mean, like once they deliver them to the station, do they? I mean, they got to plug them in right away, or they just I don't know.
It's not clear. It's clearly a plot element, but
yeah. Also, you would think Starfleet sent them to deliver the power cores, and now Starfleet's sending them to go after the Peregrine. You would think that included in those orders would be, okay, hey, we told you to do the power cells, but now we need you to do this instead. So here's how you're going to address this issue. We want you to do X, whether that's just dump the power cells or, whatever. It was kind of strange. They just left that ambiguous and Pike had to. I mean,
like it should be a decision like an admiral, somebody up the food chain should make, not the captain, right?
right. I mean, he's got a lot of autonomy. They're out, on the fringe or whatever it is, but still, yeah, the orders are coming from Starfleet. This wasn't just they just picked up a distress call, and then that would have made more sense if they had, we're on this mission from Starfleet, but now we've picked up this distress call and we have to decide what to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. What's the point of it coming from Starfleet? It would have been
not sure
the plot more if they had just picked up a random one. Well, the thing that's worth noting about the power cells is, so they have to make a decision. Do we go check on the USS Peregrine, or do we take these power cells? And if they choose to not go to the space station, the whole station will go dark, including life support, is what they say. So it's really, it's a Sophie's choice. They got to decide. Do we go after, these people that have activated this distress beacon, or do we, basically doom this space station?
Yeah, and they say all that, so we get the information, but it's the way it's delivered. It just, the decision didn't seem like, I don't know, they didn't quite have the gravity of the situation. I felt like in this scene of, oh man, like, it's not just that these folks on the space station are going to be inconvenienced. They're going to die if we don't deliver these power cells. So we've got to do both. How are we going to figure this out? It was just, well, we can still do both.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's what Pike ultimately ends up deciding, right? He decides he's going to split the party. He's going to take the cadets on one last away mission, is what he says, and he's going to send the Enterprise all along to the space station. So this away mission, this party will be, disconnected from the Enterprise for however long it takes for them to get there and then come back and rescue them.
It just seemed like they were having more of a discussion about what they were going to do, as if there was some kind of choice here, whereas it really seems like they have no option but to do what Pike decides to do.
Right.
Unless they're literally just going to say, yeah, everybody that's on, this deep space station, however many people that is, we're just going to forget them. And that's not really the Starfleet way. They're not an ends justifies the means kind of organization.
So, that's what ends up happening. Pike decides he's going to take an away team, and that the rest of the Enterprise is going to head along to the starbase. So the next scene we see, I believe it's Pike, Hemmer, La'an, Uhura. We see Kirk again. It's the first time we've seen Kirk in quite a few episodes. What's his first name? It's Kirk's dad, whatever his
George.
First name. George Kirk. We have
Sam. George Samuel Sam Kirk.
We see Spock, we see Ubenga, and we also see Chapel. So it's quite the away mission. It's interesting that they sent both of the doctors. I
thought the same thing. As soon as I saw Chapel, I was like, wait a second, she's here too? Like, they sent the whole medical team?
Granted, it's a distress call. I get it. But, that leaves...
What if something happens? And, it's not like things don't come up on the USS Enterprise once in a while.
Well, yeah, it's got a crew. Didn't we determine at this point it's got a crew of about 150 people? That's...
Yeah, and every other day they run into some death-defying situation where half the crew's in danger or injured. So, yeah, I would think that they would leave someone... we've seen other medical staff in sickbay besides the two of them before. So they're not the only medical personnel on the ship, but they're clearly the two heads of sickbay. So, yeah, I thought it was strange. It struck me too. The second I saw that, I was like, wait a second, really? They're both going? Okay.
I guess for that, yeah. They also have Pike and Spock. So, I guess Una's still...
granted, of the two missions, you want to staff up for this one because the other ones literally just fly to this station and unload the cargo.
We see the away team, and they have landed on an icy planet. There is snow flying around, and they are clearly all cold. I did make mention that you can see they land, I don't know, probably quarter mile away from the USS Peregrine, and you can see it in the background, behind them, and it's, I guess it's in the ice or in the snow, and it's at a cockeyed angle, so you get the impression that it is perhaps crashed.
They mentioned that before, that it had made an emergency landing.
Okay.
On the planet, and Umbenga says something along those lines of, isn't any landing on a planet an emergency landing?
Right. It always strikes me like, as I just watched an episode of Voyager, and they land Voyager on a planet
They
too.
made such a big deal out of that in season 1 of Voyager, how it can land on planets, and then they never do it again.
Well, like it's so. I mean, I don't know. I imagine it's like a gigantic boat, like a cruise ship. Like they are not designed to be on land.
No, it's the separating the saucer section of
Yeah.
TNG where they did this cool thing at the beginning, and then I mean, very clearly they realized, oh shoot, this eats up a ton of special effects budget when we do this, so we'd better not do it again.
Well, you have all these ships that are designed to, operate in space where there's zero gravity. Now you have this gigantic ship on a planet with gravity affecting it. Like
Right.
The ships, I would imagine they are not designed to be structurally strong for land.
Or something that's going to stay in vacuum versus something that's going to go down in an atmosphere is very, very, very different.
Anyway, so we see the Peregrine crashed in the background, or I guess landed in the background. Ice and snow flying around. Hemmer mentioned that he likes it because it reminds him of Andoria, so they are clearly a cold species.
Yeah, and that confused me because I can't remember what species Hemmer is, but he's not an Andorian. I think we've established that, but he sure looks like one. And now he's waxing about missing Andoria. I'm like, okay, I don't know.
He's not an Andorian? I thought he was.
I thought they said he was some other species.
Yeah, I just looked him up real quick. He's an Anar.
Yeah, whatever that is.
So he's an Anar, but maybe he's from Andor. I don't know. It's not important.
Yeah.
So they make mention, they all get their tricorders out. They're going to see if they can find any life forms or see anything.
They're a subspecies of Andorians.
Oh, so he is
native to the northern wastes of Andoria.
Oh.
Wow. Okay. Well, I don't know when we find out about this subspecies of Andorians. It's from Enterprise, apparently. Anyway. All right, well, I didn't know that, but there we go. So he is an Andorian, just a different kind of Andorian, so that's why he's remembering Andor fondly.
Andoria.
So Andoria. Yeah. Now who's crossing IPs?
We see the next scene, we see they make quick mention that the scanners aren't working, and they see some bloody something on the ground. So there's clearly been some sort of battle or accident or something. And then it cuts, and you're sort of getting an interior shot from the USS Peregrine, and we see like Pike kind of like crowbarring open, this door, and you see the snow behind him. So they are on the outside trying to get into the USS Peregrine to see what has happened. There's kind of blood all over. There's a couple bloody handprints.
They found a body at this point too.
Had they? Okay.
Yeah.
So clearly there has been either a major accident or something. Bad news has happened because they haven't detected any life signs, and they haven't really. The ship is clearly in bad shape.
Yeah.
So he gets the door open, and most of the away team comes on board the USS Peregrine. And I made mention here, or I took notes, that the away mission uniforms on this episode, they're all like black leather.
Yeah.
Fancy looking. They are like not like any away team mission we've seen in any other show or even in this show. Like they're kind of fancy looking.
Yeah, again, the costume department's killing it.
We see, and I thought this was kind of a cool choice, is because we saw the exterior shot of the USS Peregrine being kind of at an angle stuck in the snow. The camera is actually, the camera that's filming the show is actually cockeyed, 15, 20 degrees for like the next probably 2 or 3 scenes to indicate to the audience that the ship is not level with the ground. So there are some artistic shots with the camera to remind the audience.
When you're a fancy pants director, you get to do Dutch angles a lot.
Yeah. So they do some investigation, and they determine that all of the systems are offline, but the controls, while they were up and working, had been rerouted to engineering. So you kind of get the impression that the crew was holed up in engineering, and they were trying to, consolidate down to, a small section of the ship.
But there's, I can't remember whose line it is, but there's a mention that this is a little strange. Why would they do that? Why would they route all the controls to engineering? They're a little puzzled by this.
Right. La'an does some casual looking around and determines that she's found 20 casualties, including the captain. So immediately we know that a good chunk of the crew they have found the bodies of them anyway.
Yeah, and they've found basically a massacre out on the ice. As part of the crew was searching outside, they found this site where there's a whole bunch of bodies that are just strewn about.
They are able to do some research on the ship, on the panel there, and I believe it's Uhura determines that there are 99 people aside to the crew of the Peregrine, and they've already found 20 bodies.
Yeah.
So, and they've, like you said, seen lots of blood. So whatever has happened here, it's not looking good for the crew.
Yeah, and at first, Mbenga says he believes that the first couple bodies they find, he looks like they just got caught in the storm, and he believes that for some reason the crew must have all been outside the ship and gotten caught in the storm and died. And then as they start finding these bodies and blood everywhere, they are realizing that no, something much worse has happened here.
It cuts and we see Pike listening to an audio log, so they've been able to get the computer system to respond enough. So it's not like the entirety of the ship is down. It's just definitely not functional. And there is an audio log, and it's not clear who is leaving this audio log, but the audio log indicates that the Peregrine found 3 survivors, and one of the survivors had a Gorn egg implanted in it.
It's the captain of the Peregrine who's leaving It's the captain's log.
Doesn't she make mention that they rescued him from some sort of slave planet or something like that?
My recollection was that they just found their ship adrift somewhere or something like that.
Okay. So the Peregrine has rescued some survivors, one of which had a Gorn egg on it, or in their body.
Or some amount of Gorn eggs, had several.
Apparently, one of the crew of the USS Peregrine recognized the Gorn, egg or symbiote, or they did a scan and they were able to determine that they were infected with a Gorn, and the crew used a grenade basically to blow everyone up and to kill them. So they're clearly, as we've seen in the past episodes, the Federation is very afraid of the Gorn. They are a very violent species. So much so that one of the crew just decided to take everybody out and used a grenade. And apparently the ships are tuned to automatically send a distress call in response to explosions. So she makes mention that was the reason that a distress call went out, was because the ship sent it, not any of the crew.
Right. And she specifically says, hey, we tried to stop that. If anyone's getting this, you shouldn't have come and you should leave right now.
Yeah, her exact line is, if I could reach Starfleet now, I would say stay away. And she's clearly, her voice is very serious. There's a lot going on with the Gorn clearly on this ship. Next, we see Uhura gets the systems up, and or at least some of the internal systems, were presumably the scanners. She finds 2 life signs, one of which is a human and one of which is unknown. So immediately the crew is kind of on edge because they're anticipating perhaps that there's one survivor and maybe a Gorn left. Mm-hmm. So they decide to go and investigate to try and find if there is indeed any people left. And as they approach it, this one doorway, we see this blue alien guy come out of the door. And it was not any particular race that I recognized. Did you recognize that guy?
This is a brand new race. We've not seen these before.
So the blue guy comes out and he has kind of a staff or
some kind of spear.
Yeah. And he's a little bit, I want to say protective, not violent, because it's 5-on-1. And he starts talking, but you don't understand what he's saying. And I think at one point Pike asks La'an, hey, what's he saying? And they basically say that for whatever he's saying, the universal translator does not understand what he's saying. So the implication is this is some sort of brand new race or some sort of brand new style of communication that the computer does not know how to handle.
Yeah, and La'an says, okay, Uhura, do something.
Right.
And Uhura says, that's not how linguistics works. Yeah, I can't just listen to this language I've never heard for 30 seconds and start communicating with them.
The obvious thing was, because again, it was 5-1, right? I mean, the obvious thing would have been, to put your hands up and not aim 5 guns at this blue guy if they want to calm him down, but that wasn't
Yeah.
it. Ultimately, that's what Pike says. He has to tell everybody, like, hey, whoa, whoa, whoa. This guy doesn't understand us. We don't understand him. It's not a Gorn. Let's just everybody put our weapons down and see what happens. So that's what they do, and the blue guy lowers his spear and decides that he's going to at least try and help them. And he leads them back into this doorway, this cabin, whatever, where he was hanging out. And there's a young human girl. She's, I don't know, probably 10. You get the impression that this blue guy and this girl have kind of been holed up here probably since the distress call went out.
Yeah. So several days.
The next thing we see, it cuts to Hemmer and Uhura. So the party has split. The away team has split up, and they are exploring different parts of the ship, which to me seems like a terrible idea, right? I mean, they know that at least 20 people are dead, and there's just blood everywhere. I would think you would want to keep all your resources together instead of like sending people off in like two-person investigatory teams.
Although at this point they're operating under the assumption that the Gorn are all dead.
Okay, I mean,
they get this indication that this grenade was used. They found all these dead bodies out on the ice. They know the Gorn don't like the cold. It's not the worst assumption, but I tend to agree with you. They're a little bit lax with their security here.
It seems like maybe they should have, dug a little bit deeper before they just start splitting up. But
right.
Ultimately, Hemmer and Uhura are on a, they're doing their own thing, and Uhura, she's kind of making small talk with him, and she mentions, she says, that she will miss him when she goes back. That because it seems to me that Hemmer is the person that Uhura connected with the most.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And Hemmer had a great line where he said, people tend to find their way back around in Starfleet. So Hemmer's not too worried about not seeing her again because he has a feeling that things.
And it's nice to see, Hemmer is in engineering with Uhura. They're trying to fix the ship. But when they first come on the ship, Pike kind of turns to Spock. Hemmer's there. They're all there when they walk onto the ship at the first. And Pike turns to Spock and says, hey, Spock, what's the status of the ship? Let me know what the system, what systems are up, and what's our prospects for getting this thing fixed. And I was thinking, boy, that sure seems like a question for Hemmer.
Yeah, good point. I mean,
but Spock is this, Spock's one of our stars of the show, and we got to give him something to do, I guess. And we're presumably going to have 6 more seasons of this thing. There's going to be plenty of time for Hemmer to shine later, but would have been nice for him to get a little bit more engineering in on this episode. But then later with Uhura, he gets to do that. So
he does not get a ton of credit as the chief engineer in this show. Certainly not like in some of the other shows, right? I mean, like O'Brien was a superstar, right? I mean,
right.
B'Elanna Torres.
Scotty's the chief engineer usually has a lot more to do on the show than in this one so far.
The next thing we see is it cuts to sickbay, and we see the blue guy, we see the young girl, we see M'Benga and Chapel. They are just checking out the young girl. La'an walks in, or she was already there, I forget, and she starts to just lays into this little girl and just grills her about why she didn't tell the rest of the crew about the Gorn egg. When they saved this little girl, she was just like, this is really reckless. You should have told the people that were coming to rescue you that this guy had a Gorn egg in them.
She has given her the third degree for sure.
Yeah, like this little 10-year-old girl, like she has no idea what's going on. So at one point, like it's so kind of aggressive that M'Benga steps in and he says, La'an, stop harassing my daughter. And then he catches himself and he changes it to my patient. So
yeah,
clearly he's still, reeling from the loss of his daughter. But
yeah, he's still working through some things. Nice to see.
He had to jump in at all, though, just speaks to how aggressive La'an was being.
Totally. But no, that's a nice little nod to we're going to have a little more continuity in this show than we have in some other Star Trek shows. Even though this is an episode of the week style show, we're not going to forget what happened to these characters, the next week. Which, again, generally is what happened in, say, Next Generation. and Voyager to a point. Voyager had a little more of a through line than that, but Next Generation, things would happen, and the next week it'd be like, it'd be fine.
Well,
Geordi gets kidnapped by the Romulans and brainwashed into being an assassin, and then the next week he's just like whistling through engineering, like.
Well, that was the nature of TV back then, right?
Right.
Yeah, I was a huge Star Trek Next Generation nerd, and not even I could catch every single episode, right? So and VCRs were such a brand new thing, like it wasn't even feasible that you could record every episode.
They couldn't assume that the audience had seen last week's episode.
It's such a weird paradigm because you look at it now and it's insane to not watch the entirety of a show or a season.
And
right? In order on one weekend. You could binge the entire thing, right? Like when we were kids and we were watching Next Generation, if you wanted to watch all of season 2, you had to tune in on 24 different days.
Not necessarily consecutive ones. There'd be breaks in there.
Right.
So
it was right.
It might be a repeat this week, and then up next week's the new one. And if you didn't catch it.
So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword because I do like, the stories that arc longer.
I think it's more of a two-handed sword.
You're right. I'm never going to get that right. So
no, you said it. No, you got it right this time.
Because what ends up happening, and to me, sometimes I think it's exhausting because it's like if you don't watch all of the episodes of something, you feel like you missed out. Like this season kind of. I'm going to skip the rest of these episodes and then pick it up again next season. See if it catches up.
Yeah, you can't really do that. But the other thing though is that our seasons are a lot shorter now. This is 10 episodes, and a Next Generation season was 22.
Right. You could easily have done that in Next Generation. Just, you could have gone to college and missed an entire year and come back and picked right up, right?
And, and depending on the season, that probably wouldn't have been the worst idea.
Right. La'an, just to circle back to the actual episode, La'an does make mention, she says the girl and the two aliens were probably refugees from a breeding planet. It was a breeding planet, not a slave planet. So La'an is basically explaining, and I believe it's right here where she flashes back to her brother and her being hunted by the Gorn. So clearly La'an has experience with the Gorn. So she basically makes mention that the Gorn breed on specific planets and they capture various races and species. It's very, very much like the xenomorphs from Aliens.
Yeah, we'll get into that some more, but yeah, it is. And the logistics of this are just insane. They're going to set up these whole planets with breeding humanoids, and a lot of them presumably, so that they can breed themselves. Like, how did that process even get anyway?
Yeah. What we see next is Spock is off on his own, and he's exploring the ship. He's walking down this poorly lit hallway. He's got his, what are those things like? It's like a phaser rifle.
Yeah.
It's one step up from the hand phase. Anyway, so he's walking down this hallway and he sees a bloody trail in this hall. Not, like drips of blood, like a body has been drugged. There's clearly a lot of blood in this hallway. And it's leading to this air vent, I guess. And, you can see the air vent's blood, and he's walking over and he's getting kind of close to it. And, and there's some tension building up here. And M'Benga and Pike just, appear right behind him, and Spock freaks out.
And he just kind of jumps a little bit. He doesn't even like scream or yell or anything. He just kind of, he's startled.
And M'Benga says, "Oh, I didn't realize you were so jumpy."
It's like, dude, you snuck up on him on a ship that's been like torn apart by the Gorn. What do you want?
Yeah, the lights are out. There's no AC. You've seen nothing but blood and bodies. Like, it's just bad news. And he's surprised, like, "Oh, I didn't really think sneaking up on you was going to be an issue." Like, I don't know. I just kind of felt like the crew is
seems like a good idea for Spock to be on high alert.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, frankly, he's kind of, Luan she's clearly primed to be concerned about this. She's on high alert. So Spock, but yeah, Pike in particular has just been really laid back this whole episode.
Yeah, good point.
He's, kind of like, okay, guys, let's get the job done. And he doesn't seem too fazed by the fact that they found this whole crew murdered by Gorn. And yeah, he's supposed to stay calm and keep the crew focused. And he's doing what a captain should do, but he doesn't seem like calm and determined. He seems calm and detached almost.
Yeah, that's a good
But
point.
again, I guess he knows he's not going to die.
Yeah, okay. He is rather unperturbed to be on this mission. He's probably the least on alert of all of the crew.
Yeah. But yeah, again, he's the only one of them who knows for sure that he's got like 9.5 more years to live. So
he's got the get out of jail free card.
Yep.
We cut to sick bay and chapel, and actually Cadet Chia is there now too. So she was on the away mission, but we didn't see her until now. The little girl, and then the blue guy, who the girl has told us she has nicknamed Buckley. So those the four of them are in sick bay, and the blue guy is not looking very healthy.
Right.
So Chapel is sort of investigating. At one point, she pulls up like the sleeve on his arm, and it's kind of all slimy and gross. And there's a cut to his a shot of the side of his neck, and I wasn't sure if he was bleeding blue blood or that was his veins, but it was clear that Buckley was not in a good place. He's very sick. Yeah,
and his pulse is elevated. He's panting. He's breathing heavily. I feel like you could make some inferences at this point, but that doesn't happen. Chapel just keeps investigating as if he's just got a cold or something.
Yeah, those are all signs of illness in any race, let alone this brand new race they've met. But yeah, you're right. She seems unperturbed by it.
Yeah, and again, they've had a lot of encounters with the Gorn. They've got people who've had firsthand encounters with them. They I would think would have some information about what this whole breeding process they have looks like.
Well, didn't La'an say in the last episode that the Gorn were like a rumor that no one has ever actually seen the Gorn, and La'an says anybody that's ever actually seen the Gorn ended up dead. So they're kind of like they're like the boogeyman in the Federation.
Well, La'an's seen them, so
right. La'an has. La'an's the only one taking it seriously.
Yeah,
maybe that's why they don't have detailed records on them.
Yeah, maybe that's true, but. Again, though, you would think like when they figured out the Gorn were here and did this, that Pike would have been, hey, maybe I haven't gotten all the details from you before, but hey, Luan, right now, tell us everything you know about the Gorn.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, oh well. So yeah, it's a mystery why this guy's sick, and
yeah, right. That's a good point. Like all this talk of Gorn eggs and Buckley is sick, and nobody seems to be worried about it, except the little girl. So she sees Buckley panting and doing whatever he's doing.
Yeah, and she just gets out of Dodge.
She gets super nervous. She runs and hides on top of one of this med bay, and she covers her mouth. She's clearly very scared.
She's like, I've seen this movie before. I'm getting out of here.
The camera cuts back to Buckley, and he just full on chest bursts, alien style. We see 4 small aliens, probably the size of mice, rats.
Yeah, something like that.
Burst out of his stomach, and he is clearly done. One of the small aliens, which are Gorn, immediately attacks one of the other. I want to say embryos. That's not the right word. One of the young ones just bites it in the neck. So we know that there are one of them is dead and 3 are alive. Chapel, after she sees what has happened to Buckley, she finally, realizes that this is serious business. She runs and hops up on top of one of the other med bays and puts up a force field, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, and smart, quick thinking on her part.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we see it cuts real quick, and we see Duke, and he is in this hallway, and he's having a discussion about this away mission, and not immediately, there's kind of like this slow overhead shot you see down this ladder, and ultimately what ends up happening is one of the babies.
Hey, look, we know what's going to happen. He's on a Star Trek show. This is the first time we've ever seen this character, and this is a dangerous situation. He's going to be fine.
He's lucky he got a name. I mean, he's got a name, so there's a chance he might come back. If he had been unnamed, it's guaranteed. Sure. never see him again. Anyway, what ends up happening is you see this overhead shot from this ladder. One of the baby Gorn drops down and bites him in the neck, and then something. It kind of looked like it was the baby Gorn at first. Like it's not clear. Something drags him off into the shadows.
Well, this shot didn't look great, but it's the baby Gorn like somehow like hauls his whole body like down the corridor.
On the second time I watched it, because he's in the shadows, I get the impression that one of the older Gorn drug him down there. No, you thought it was the little tiny thing?
I don't know. I mean, are there older Gorn at this point?
Clearly the Gorn get bigger later. There's a dog-sized one later. There's an alpha.
Yeah.
I kind of assumed that maybe that was what drug him, not one of these little ones. It's not important. It was definitely weird. The way it was shot, I mean, Duke is a full-blown adult human, and he just sort of gets drugged down.
Yeah, it looks like, really weird.
Yeah, for sure. But the point is that he gets bitten in the neck and dragged out of there, so Duke is no more. We cut back to La'an and Chapel in sickbay. They have determined that the Gorn are not there, and they decide to go looking for the girl because she has disappeared after Buckley involuntary surgery. I don't know what the word is.
His birthing. He was in the birthing ward.
They make mention that the comms are still down. They cannot communicate to the rest of the crew that, hey, the Gorn have, they are here indeed. They do make mention that the scanners are working, but there are no Gorn shown on the scanners. And that actually comes later.
So, keep that in mind, all you prospective parents out there. Don't have your baby in Starfleet Medical, because they cannot keep track of where the newborns are.
They do ultimately, La'an and Chapel do end up finding the girl. She is, quote fingers, hiding. Not very well. And La'an basically gives her a speech about her dead brother and talks about how, the Gorn killed my brother too. We forgot to mention earlier, after Mbenga has this little moment of telling her, hey, leave my daughter alone. Oh, wait, no, this is my patient. He tells her, hey, she's been through some crazy stuff, and berating her is not going to help. You're like one of the few people who knows what she's been through. So, instead of just yelling at her, maybe you can show her how to get out from this. Yeah, how to overcome. Yeah, clearly she's scared. She's, again, a real young girl. So
yeah, and he's like, yeah, she survived, but that doesn't mean she's gonna be able to live. You got to help her to move on from this. She's got some major trauma here, and so Luan clearly took that to heart. And so the next time she encounters her, she, instead of being guns blazing, she says, hey, I've been through this too, and you can get through this, but we need your help.
This girl has like super Newt from Aliens 2 vibes, right? Her whole family has been killed. She's been hiding for a while. I mean, I guess at this point we can dig into this a bit. I'll talk more at the end, but yeah, I mean, I'm kind of amazed that James Cameron doesn't get a story by credit on this episode, quite frankly, because this is just a straight ripoff of Aliens. It's clear that they've taken a lot of the major story arcs from that. We see a quick scene of Uhura and Hemmer in engineering, and they have succeeded in getting the majority of the systems back online. And Uhura makes, she had a funny line. She said, Team Hemhura strikes again, which is, what is it? Is it a malapropism when you put two words together? So she puts Hemmer and Uhura together.
Yeah, she did that in the previous episode where they were in the cargo hold together working through that disaster. So, yeah, again, you're right that Hemmer's probably the person she's got the closest relationship with on the ship at this point.
As they are celebrating I wrote a xenomorph, but a Gorn drops down, about 10 feet away from Hemmer and actually spits some acid that hits him on the side of the neck.
Not fatal, yeah. He's
not happy about it.
Yeah, he says it burns quite a bit.
We cut real quick to Kirk, Spock, Pike, and Mbenga in sickbay. And Kirk is clearly not happy about the danger on this away mission. I don't think he knew what he signed up for. Now that the Comms are back up because of Uhura and Hemmer. Pike alerts everyone about what's going on, and he basically gets, does a ship-wide alert and tells everyone to get back to sickbay. They kind of have a quick debriefing on the Gorn. They've used some of the scanners of the ship, or they've read it from the computer on the ship, that the Gorn's biological makeup renders them invisible to all of our sensors. So just the genetics of a Gorn are resistant to sensors, so they are unable to track them even when the sensors are working.
Yeah.
Which they explain that's why they didn't see any of the baby Gorn inside of Buckley when they scanned him. There's a quick mention that the Gorn mature at different rates depending on the species. So some species, they mature very slowly, and some species, they mature very rapidly. There is mention, I forget what species it was. One species takes weeks, but humans take days. I think they said something about 4 days.
And this, I mean, I'll go with it because sure, why not? But yeah, it sure seems like their medical technology would have noticed something amiss, even if they didn't see specifically, okay, we don't see that there's Gorn, but hey, there's there's these 4 pockets in this thing's body that are, I guess they hadn't seen this alien before, so they don't know its physiology. So maybe that's the explanation there. But
yeah, I was going to say, couldn't you, check respiration, or
an X-ray would show you hey, look, there's.
Maybe that's why they made Buckley a new species, so they'd have a pass on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'll give him that one.
Kirk continues to lose it, while all this is going on. At one point, Spock says that the Gorn are impressive, and Kirk just is not having it. He's like, "What do you mean they're impressive?"
Yeah, and he says something about then he starts basically going hey, aren't you're not fazed by any of this. You're just this cold-blooded Vulcan bastard, basically. And yeah, as this was happening, I'm thinking okay, I know we're fairly informal in the Enterprise. Pike refers to the crew by their names pretty regularly. I don't remember who it was, but someone earlier in the episode, one of the crew referred to him as Chris.
Oh, interesting.
So and as if that was something they did regularly. It wasn't, it didn't sound like something that was unusual or strange. It just was a normal day on the Enterprise, and someone's calling the captain Chris. So that, they're keeping it pretty informal. But this is still, at the end of the day, this is still a military organization. They've got ranks, and I mean, Spock's the third officer. He's the third in command of the ship, and Lieutenant Kirk is just going off on him, and nobody reprimands him. Nobody says it. I mean, at the end of it, Pike's kind of like, okay, hey, calm down. We got to work together. But I just felt like he really crossed the line here, and someone would have said something to him.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's a really good point. There's nothing in the military. It's hierarchy and respect. So yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point.
Starfleet's always come off as, not that rigid with the hierarchy, but, they definitely have one. And, you're not just following orders blindly. You can question things and you can have a discussion and all that. But I don't think you generally can, scream in your superior officer's face like that.
Well, especially, I mean, again, Spock is the science officer. So if the Gorn are going to be impressive to anyone, it's going to be the science officer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We've just learned literally 30 seconds ago that they can mature, in days. They are not on our sensors. Of course, those things are going to be impressive too.
Yeah, that sure sounds impressive to me. Doesn't mean I want to encounter one or that I think they're great, but they sure sound impressive.
At this point, they make mention that everything is back online except navigation. So Pike has a kind of what I thought was kind of a weird line. He says, "Well, that means our mission is complete." And I was like, "Well, I mean, isn't your mission to, it's a distress call? Aren't you supposed to try and track down all of the crew?" I didn't get the impression they've determined where all of the crew is.
Well, so their mission was to go down and provide support to the crew and help them fix the ship. So I guess he's saying, well, we fixed the ship, so our mission's complete. And the crew, we can't help the crew because they're all dead. So that part is moot, and we've completed the mission to fix the ship. So we're done. We've done what we came here to do, and now it's time to go. But yeah, the way he says it kind of has like a bit of a mission accomplished.
Yeah,
vibe.
right. Yeah, right.
And yeah, it's not going quite to plan here, Chris.
What the next thing they mention is that they need to build a trap for the Gorn. Because again, the Enterprise is not back. They can't leave even if they want to. The mission may be completed, but they're still waiting for the Enterprise to return. So they need to capture and kill or do whatever to keep themselves safe from the Gorn. We are reminded that the Gorn don't like the cold, and so they determine that they are going to build a trap for the Gorn using the environmental controls, and they are going to, basically funnel the surviving Gorn into different parts of the ship based on temperature and then attempt to trap them. We see a cut to the Enterprise. We see Pike Umbenga and the little girl whose name we learn is Oriana, and they are on the bridge. And the bridge is all beat up, and again, the camera is at, 15 degrees or whatever. So you realize that things aren't 100%. But again, all the systems are working. So Pike gets the computer back up and working. He asks I can't remember, he says, Pike, or he says, computer, restore controls to the bridge or something like that. And it asks him for his command code. And his command code is 246810.
Yep.
And Umbenga was like, you haven't changed that yet? Which I thought was kind of, I always thought the command codes on the Enterprise are, they're cool. I don't think that it's not a password. I don't feel like
it's not necessarily, they say it in front of other people, so it's not intended to be kept secret clearly. But I think it's supposed to be a little harder to guess than 246810.
I always got the impression that it was a mixture of, like the computer recognizes the voice and they know the.
It is, yeah, and clearly the voice print is the more important part. But
right.
Yeah, reproducing someone's voice is not that difficult. So we would hope that it's also like you got to have there's some kind of biometrics with your comm badge too, hopefully, or something.
Yeah, right. There's a little 2-factor in your comm badge.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it was a brief moment of comedy that his command code is 246810.
Yeah, once again, we see Pike does not take much very seriously.
No. We cut to a hallway and we see what is a dog-sized Gorn chasing Uhura. And it has, predator-style, heat vision kind of. So it kind of cuts from Uhura's vision to the Gorn vision, and you see it's clearly chasing her. So Uhura runs down this hallway. Kirk closes the door real quick behind her, and then they flood that area with cold. So they're again trying to,
they're trying to drive it to the part of the ship they want it to go to. Yeah.
So did you get the impression? So the one, because the Gorn is now, at least the one that she just saw was dog size, and the ones that came out of Buckley were mouse size. Did you get the impression that it had matured that quickly?
That's what I thought, but I don't know. Again, it's not real clear here what exactly is going on. That was my impression, was that these are the Gorn that came out of Buckley and they've gotten that big that fast, but I don't know.
It wasn't, that was the impression I got too, was that what has happened. So perhaps Buckley's race, they mature extremely fast. Cause what was the time period between those two was like, an hour maybe?
I mean, it's hard to know the time scale of this episode, but it doesn't seem like it's that long. It's not days.
So anyway, we see this Gorn chase Uhura, and she gets away. We see, we cut to, the next scene. So, wherever the Gorn is now, they've got another crew member there to try and get it to chase them. And this one happens to be Spock. Spock makes mention that he sees the Gorn, but he cannot get the Gorn to engage. So he tells the rest of the crew, he's like, hey, I see this thing. I'm getting close to it, but I can't get it to chase me. And I forget who it is, but one of them makes mention that you need to get angry and
it's Luan. She says that, they respond to aggression. So you have to be, you have to get aggressive, get in its face.
Yeah, so Spock kind of goes like Wolvie Berserk style on this thing. Like he gets like uncharacteristically angry, even for a Vulcan certainly, but I think even for like a human, like he
says something along the lines of, I'm going to let the rage in my mind go to my heart or something like that. I can't remember, or the rage in my heart go to my mind or something like that.
Whatever he does, it works because he gets pretty angry. And so just as it starts to chase Spock, and just as it's going to be too late again, Kirk saves him at the very last minute. You don't even see you don't see Kirk, like it just kind of cuts, and all of a sudden Kirk is there and he has saved Spock. So you don't get the impression like Spock is running at Kirk, and he's got 3 seconds where this door closes kind of thing.
Yeah.
What,
But the second he sees him, he kind of turns to attack him, and Kirk has to say, whoa, hey, it's me.
Yeah.
They're like, but, down, boy.
Right.
So, yeah, like you said, Spock's kind of in berserker mode at this point.
La'an mentions that they actually hear 2 Gorn fighting, so what he thought was just one was 2. So La'an says, when those 2 are finished, there will be 1 left, the Alpha. We put that down and we go home.
Yeah,
so,
and I got the impression that was the plan, was they were trying to drive them into the same spot of the ship so they would fight each other, and then they'd only have 1 to deal with.
Ultimately, so we saw the one baby Gorn right after it bursts out of Buckley kill the other one. So even as they grow, they're extremely territorial, kind of the Highlander mentality there. So,
and presumably they grow out of that at some point, because we know the Gorn are operating starships. So, they have a civilization. It can't be that any Gorn that run into each other immediately start fighting each other, because they'd still be in caves, So,
right.
Must be, when they're young, they're jockeying for position and trying to, get who's going to be the alpha, because we're going to kill everybody else in the litter, I guess. And then after that, they must get over it. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. It must be like a
juvenile Gorn thing.
After the 2 Gorn fight, there's 1 left. So La'an is next up to, I guess, bait this thing. And at one point, like, she goes kind of like badass. She sees the Gorn and she drops her phaser and she yells at the Gorn. She's like, "I'm unarmed, come get me." Like, it was clearly very reckless, but she had a point to prove, right?
And it works.
She runs down this hallway and she kind of hides in this hexagonal storage tube kind of thing. And the Gorn jumps on top. It has a glass window and the Gorn is like clawing at the glass and marking up the glass, so she doesn't have a whole lot of time before this thing, gets through to her. Right about then, we see Hemmer shoot down this huge wind and ice.
She screams at him, Hemmer now, and then he does this thing. And before that, when they were planning this, okay, we're going to drive the 2 together, well, they're going to kill one. They didn't really go through all the details of the plan. We kind of see their plan as it unfolds here, but they made a mention that they were going to, ultimately, this was what they were going to do, is have one of them be lured to Hemmer, and Hemmer says something along the lines of, I'll help you with this plan, but I won't be the one to kill it, because he's a pacifist.
Yeah, that was a really cool line, actually. Yeah, he was like, he clearly recognizes the threat. He was like,
yeah.
He actually says, he's like, "I'll do what it takes, but you'll have to be the one that will kill it."
Yeah, basically, I won't be the one to kill it, but I'll help you with this plan, because I recognize that, my friends are in danger and I'm willing to help them. But then, yeah, when it gets time to it, she's like, "Okay, Hemmer, now," and he hits the button and hits this thing with some kind of extreme coolant,
right,
that freezes it into a block of ice. So, yeah, Hemmer, I think, you can rationalize this however you want, but you're the one who killed this thing.
Well, I maybe, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Maybe whatever he froze it with, they have the ability to unfreeze it.
They can thaw it later, and
maybe they were going full aliens too, and they were going to take this back to Starfleet and study it and make a weapon out of it. Who knows?
Hey, there you go.
Well, again, I don't know why I bring that all up, because it's moot, because La'an gets out of her hexagonal thing and immediately just goes at, there's a little frozen Gorn statue next to it, and she just goes nuts, and I think she hits it with her phaser rifle or whatever.
Yeah, and she crushes it into pieces, which, hey, that's exactly what she should do, so good for her.
I did note that when she destroys it, the interior of the Gorn statue, a bunch of like yellow, I assume blood oozes out.
Yeah.
White ice and then a bunch of yellow ooze, so she just straight up executes this frozen Gorn if it's not already dead.
Yeah.
Hemmer comes out from where he was, behind this console after he has hit the coolant button, and he is clearly not feeling well. He's looking pretty terrible. He is walking funny.
He's breathing hard.
Yes. He is infected with the Gorn virus, the Gorn eggs, I guess. They determine that the acid that was spit on him earlier, it wasn't just a defense That was also apparently a way that they implant eggs. So
Yeah,
Hemmer,
and he pulls his collar back, and we can see he's got the same kind of blood web kind of pattern on his skin that Buckley did before.
Hemmer realizes what's going on. He realizes, hey, that he's seen all these people get killed by Gorn. He's seen the entire crew of the Peregrine get, there's nothing left. So he knows.
Well, and he also realizes that it's gestating in him a lot faster than it did in Buckley or would in a human.
Hemmer doesn't have a whole lot of time. He says, "I'm going to go outside now." He's clearly going to get away from the crew and
go out in the cold where they won't survive.
So clearly the crew is not happy about that. They try and talk him out of it. They try and figure, we can work on something. We can come up with an alternative. We can, whatever. But Hemmer, I think he realizes the severity of the situation, and he chooses to take his own life, on his own. I mean, clearly the crew tries to talk him out of it, but he does not do it. His line is, "My sacrifice will save the lives of those I care most about. For me, there is no other choice." So he's, in essence, saying goodbye to the crew here. At one point, he gives Spock the "live long and prosper" salute, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, it was.
He has one final moment with Uhura where he says, "Uhura, I want to leave you with one last piece of advice. Open yourself, make a home for yourself amongst others, and you will find joy more often than sadness." Which is a really cool line, but it felt super out of place for Hemmer because
it really did. Hemmer is way more zen this episode. I mean, he's been this curmudgeon the whole time we've known him. In this episode in particular, he's kind of a softie, and it struck me as odd the whole time. And then when we get to the end here and we find out he's going to die, I'm like, okay, they're giving him, making him a little more cushy for his send off here. But yeah, it didn't really seem like a natural way for Hemmer to talk based on what we've seen from him before now.
I guess you could confer that, perhaps his race, or I guess any race, humans do it too. When you realize you're at the end, your values change.
Sure.
He does a pretty quick U-turn because, he goes from being fine to I have to kill myself in, 5 minutes. And
yeah,
he's got a couple good speeches. I was impressed. I thought it was cool. So ultimately, he does make the decision that he can't let this Gordon come to term. I don't know if that's the right word. So he decides to go outside of the Peregrine, where again, it's clearly very cold. I think he steps through and, the snow is swirling around and he closes his eyes and he says, "Just like Andoria." And there's a smile on his face. He was pretty happy. And then he just takes a step over this cliff. And that's the last of it. We do not see Hemmer anymore. Clearly the implication here is that he has taken his own life walking over this cliff. We do not see a body. There's nothing else. There's no more Hemmer in this. In the series, so Hemmer is no more. We cut to I don't want to go into too much. We'll talk about it at the very end. We'll talk about Hemmer's character.
Yeah,
I was deciding whether or not I wanted to lead into it right there or not.
Yeah, no, we'll have a lot to say about that afterwards.
So we see the Enterprise and the Peregrine, and they are in space, or they're in orbit of this planet or whatever. So the Enterprise has returned. They have beamed the away team up. And they are actually towing the Peregrine via a tractor beam. If you remember from before, all of the systems have been restored except for navigation. So
right.
The Peregrine does not have the ability to navigate, so they're just going to tractor beam.
They're rope towing it.
Yeah. And then it cuts to, I think it's the meeting room or the planning room, and they're having a funeral. They're having a funeral for Hemmer. And, most of the bridge crew, most of the A-team is there.
Don't forget Cadet Chia and Lieutenant...
Not Duke. Duke's dead.
That's what I'm saying. They're having a funeral for...
Oh, right.
Lieutenant Duke and Cadet Chia as well. Our two characters introduced for this episode who were pretty much destined to die.
Short of actually having a red shirt, they couldn't have more. Yeah, right. Ortegas gives kind of a cool speech about how, she would always push the engines too hard and Hemmer would, tell her to back off and then they would laugh about it. Uhura says that Hemmer reminded her of her dad. So yeah, it's actually a pretty emotional funeral. I mean, the
Yeah.
team, no one was expecting Hemmer to die, especially not in that way. I mean, it wasn't like he was killed by the Gorn. He was forced to take his own life, and he did it in an honorable way. So the crew is coming to terms with losing a crew member that way. At one point, Spock is standing there, and he makes angry fists at his sides, and he has to walk away. And Chapel sees him make the fists, and she's a little concerned. And when he leaves, she follows him. And they get out into the hallway, and Spock just straight up punches one of the bulkheads or the walls or whatever,
and caves it in. Yeah.
And Chapel comes over to check on him, and I think she puts a hand on his back or his arm, and he tells her, he's straight up. He was like, "You need to back off. I can't control myself. I'm not in a good place right now." And Chapel is very concerned, very uncharacteristic of Spock, who you never see his emotions.
Right.
And she's like, "Hey, what's going on?" And he says that he let out his rage and his pain, and now he can't control it. So he had to, do this to get to the part of him that he could use to fight the Gorn, but now he has lost control of it. And he's worried. He says, "My mind has gone weak." So, and I thought Chapel had a really great line here. She says, "It doesn't make you weak, Spock. It makes you human." So
he's kind of like, "Yeah, I don't know what's happening. I just can't control And she's like, "Well, these are your feelings. This is a normal thing." And he says that it's weakness, and she says, "No, it just, like you said, makes him human." It's a good line. But she's like cupping his face at this point.
Right.
It's a very intimate scene, and
the scene ends with them that they embrace in a very not romantic.
I thought that was more of a friendly gesture.
But the point is this is not how I would expect coworkers or crew members to behave.
No, they have a pretty high level of intimacy here.
Right. So we have two last quick scenes, and we'll discuss a little bit more about Hemmer. We see La'an and Pike, and they are in Pike's quarters. She makes mention that she has found a lead for Oriana's family. So again, Oriana is now on, as far as I know, Oriana is the only one that survived the Peregrine. And so La'an kind of takes it upon herself to investigate or to try and get Oriana back to her family. She makes mention that she's found a lead that might take her to Oriana's family, but it is outside of Federation space, and it's a weak lead. So she basically asks Pike, she says, "Hey, I want a leave of absence. I need to see this through. I want to take Oriana and, try and reunite her with her family." And, basically, I forget what her exact line is. She says, "You can, dishonorably discharge me if you have to, but I'm going to go."
She's asking for permission, and Pike says, would it really matter if I said no?
Right.
And she says, "No, I'm going either way." And he's like, "Yeah, that's what I thought. So yeah, we'll make sure." He says, I'll clear it with Starfleet. Don't worry about it.
Right. He's clearly on her side. He was not doing the typical commanding officer thing where, hey.
But this is a big step for La'an. She's the by the book, get the job done Starfleet person. And not only is she gonna, go take Mbenga's advice and try to help this little girl, but she's going to leave Starfleet temporarily to do it. So this is a big step for her.
Yeah, there's no indication of how long this is going to. It's not like the lead is in the next star system and I'll be back in 3 days. You get the impression it's going to be a while, but none of that is really mentioned. So,
and she caps it off by calling. She calls him Chris at the end of their conversation, which is clearly a big step for her too, in dropping a little bit of her formality. So she's done a lot of growing in this episode.
The very, very, very final scene is we cut to Uhura, and she is standing off the bridge. It might be on the turbolift. It's hard to say. And she's
coming off the turbolift onto the bridge. Yeah.
She's looking onto the bridge, and you just kind of see Una sitting in the captain's chair, and she kind of just stands there for a couple seconds and just kind of takes it in. And she takes, I think, one step onto the bridge, and you hear the OG comm sound that Uhura had in the original series, and Uhura just kind of smiles, and then the credits roll.
Yeah, and the shot is kind of framing Uhura with the comm station, and then we go to credits. So
Yeah, that's a good point. That was a really cool, well framed shot because you have the comm station in the front where, we know that she ends up sitting, and then you see her standing in the back, just kind of taking everything in. And then that's it. And then the credits roll. So you get the impression that Uhura has changed her mind and she is going to stay on the Enterprise. I mean, we know ultimately that's what happens because she was in the original series. We just don't know how she gets there. And we know that La'an is going to take a leave of absence. And that's it. And that's the end of episode 9. So there's one episode after this, and it is the series.
We also get another shot of Pike drinking alone in his quarters.
Oh, yeah.
There's a little bit of a montage kind of thing between the funeral and the scene with... Yeah, maybe that's like right before La'an comes into his quarters to talk to him. But
probably.
Anyway, there's a shot of him like he's got a drink poured and he's sitting in his quarters. So
right. So here's what I know. I know that the first time I watched this episode, it completely blew me away that they killed Hemmer. And I remember, because we've been talking about it, I think Hemmer's actually only in 4 episodes in this season, maybe 5. Remember, because we made mention several times, like, hey, we haven't seen Hemmer. We haven't seen a lot of these main characters.
Right. He's been in and out. I'm looking at IMDb right now. He is in 6 episodes of the 10. But he's not featured prominently in most of those. There's the one with Uhura, and they're in the cargo hold, is definitely the one where he gets the most screen time. Other than that, like, the one with the doctor and his daughter, with the whole transporter.
Yeah.
One, I can't remember what the problem they were trying to deal with the transporter, but the crew got sick. That's what it was. The medical scanner didn't work because Mbenga had his daughter in there. Yeah, Hemmer comes in to check the transporter, and he's on screen for maybe 2 minutes, and that's it.
He definitely doesn't have traditional Star Trek engineer screen time like you would see with an O'Brien or a Scotty.
No,
right. So I really like Hemmer's character, and I kind of had to do a double take when I realized how little screen time he has. Like, why was I so attached to this character? Because number one, he's not particularly likable. I mean, he's rude to everyone, but he's just such a compelling character. So when he died, I was kind of ticked. So I went and looked it up online. I'm like, is he really dead? Are they going to pull some sort of fast and loose thing where he doesn't die when he goes over this cliff or whatever? And according online, he is dead. He's not coming.
Well, it sure looked like. I mean, not only did he go outside to deal with these eggs, but he threw himself off a cliff. I think they made it pretty clear he's not coming back.
Well, the interesting thing was that apparently the actor that plays him, he knew going in. It wasn't like he signed up that I'm going to be the chief engineer for the whole show. Like, he knew that he was only going to have this small amount of episodes. But apparently the fan reaction to Hemmer, like Reddit was all lit up about people were not happy that Hemmer died. And apparently so much so, and I guess we'll see in season 2, but they are going to try and bring back, I think his name is Bruce Hovack, the character that played Hemmer, to do something else just because he was such a good actor. So Hemmer is done. I don't know, maybe we're going to get Hemmer's twin brother or maybe some flashbacks. I don't know. But I did make note that I thought it was interesting that
they could do a transporter clone like Thomas Riker.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at this, he's an engineer. He's kind of this weird race. He's very curmudgeonly. He's blind of all things.
I thought it was a great character. I just didn't think they used him enough.
Yeah, he definitely did not get enough screen time. And then after I saw the outrage after he died, I was like, okay, clearly I'm not the only one that thinks this was an underused character.
Yeah, and as that scene was happening, I'm like, okay, so you guys created this character just to kill him.
And again, they knew that. That was the play. I mean, the writers knew.
Right.
So that was the plan all along. It wasn't like they got to the end and they're like,
well, which is like, okay, now I'm getting why we didn't invest much in this character, because you guys knew you were just going to dump him off a cliff. I mean, I guess we've added to the drama of the show, and now it's, the characters, we killed somebody. So it's not like this ain't your father's Star Trek. Not every, the crew isn't necessarily safe. We might... but we know you're not going to kill Spock. We know you're not going to kill Pike. We know you're not going to kill Nurse Chapel. We know you're not going to kill Uhura. We know you're not going to kill,
there's not a lot. Yeah.
But I guess the folks that we haven't seen in future canon are on the chopping block, apparently. So
I guess, in all fairness, I mean, they killed Tasha Yar off in season 1. I mean,
that was because the actress quit.
But, it's not without precedent that a main character can be killed, I suppose. So
yeah, I guess. I don't know. I thought like the scene didn't feel cheap and the acting was fine. I just thought that like it felt like a stunt to me.
Yeah, I agree. They, I mean, again, just brainstorming here. Kess only does 2 seasons on Voyager, and they basically write her off. I mean, she was a main character. So, I guess there's precedent for it. This one was just different. I guess in both of those cases, I mean, Tasha Yar wasn't particularly popular. Kess was very unpopular.
Yeah.
But Hemmer was very popular, and they decided to off him. So I'll be curious to see what they do with that actor, if they really bring him back. But
yeah,
it's worth noting that people were not happy that Hemmer is no more. So
yeah, I just felt like it was kind of a waste, that they could have done a lot of cool things with that character, and we're never going to get that. So, I mean, it gave a lot of gravity to the episode at the end there. I'll give it that, but I don't think it's worth eliminating all the cool stories you could have told to this character just to get that one moment. But oh well.
We've been talking for about an hour. You want to rate it?
Well, let's go over a couple things before we get to the rating. Again, like as I was watching this, I'm like, okay, this. So we're, when they do the chest burster thing, I'm like, come on, guys, you can't do that.
They didn't even try and put their own spin on it.
No, they just did it. And like, guys, come on, like that's not an homage. That's just like, that's Alien's thing. Like, do your own thing. You've got, anyway. And then they're throwing a little bit of Predator into the mix too, just in case.
Right.
So we can cover it all. But yeah, I mean, and again, yeah, we've got the girl who's basically Newt. I'm like, God, is James Cameron going to sue these guys? Like, this is just straight up lifting half the plot. So yeah, okay, we can go into the rating then now, I guess. I'm not terribly impressed with this episode. I know that the folks online like this one quite a bit. It's one of the higher rated episodes of the season. Not working for me. This is not the Star Trek that I'm looking for. I don't think it was bad. I don't think it was a badly made episode. I just think it just is kind of weak. It's just a rehash of Aliens. And if I want that, guys, I can get that. I can just go watch Aliens. I don't need you guys to do like a low rent version of Aliens for me. Do Star Trek. I'm sure clearly people liked this one, so I'm in the minority here. And again, the quality was fine. I mean, they did a good job with the episode. It's just not the episode that I'm looking for. So this one's like a 6 for me.
Wow. So this again is the second highest rated episode of the season. And I agree with you. I feel like having watched it a second time, I was not excited to watch this episode again because I knew Hemmer died and I knew I was not going to be happy about it. So I went into this like, I know where this is going. Like this is, other than the fact that it is a very clear ripoff of Alien and that they stole a lot of those tropes, I feel like everything else in the episode was great. The characters were good. The plot where they had to they had to get the Enterprise away from the away team to build the tension. I thought that was an interesting take on how they could do that. I thought, giving Hemmer, his moment in the sun to save the crew was really cool.
Sure.
There was a lot of really good things about this episode. I did not like the Alien, I don't know, parody is the right word, but you're right. That definitely felt like, dude, they could have done so many different things with the Gorn bursting out of that guy.
Yeah.
If they had burst out of his feet or his head or, and they didn't, it was like a shot for shot remake. If they had just spread it a little bit, why would
they even look kind of like the xenomorph?
Other than that, I thought it was a great episode. And I was very unhappy clearly to see Hemmer go. I'll give it an 8 just because I'm willing to look past the Aliens stuff just because the rest of it was so good.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, they're clearly doing some things that people like because, like you said, this is one of the highest rated episodes of the season. And some of my favorite episodes of the season have been some of the lowest rated ones. So, clearly they're making a bit of a new brand of Star Trek that isn't quite to my taste all the time, but they're finding an audience and they're doing stuff the audience likes. And I like the show. Again, I'm enjoying this show a lot more than I did Discovery. So I'm really happy with the direction they've taken, and I've really liked some of the stories they've told. But some of the other ones have, I don't know. Yeah, this one, again, it's just not what I'm coming to Star Trek for. It wasn't bad. It was fine. If this had been, an episode of an Aliens TV show,
Yeah.
would have been great. It was well made. It was well acted. It was well shot. The costumes were great. The effects were good. The Gorn looked scary. I mean, everything about it was good. It's just not what I want from a Star Trek episode.
I think this is clearly a very action focused episode. So we've had several, morality plays. We had the chosen child. We had Ubenga losing his daughter. Those are morality plays, right? So this, clearly I think they were going for a little more action.
Yeah.
So I think it's cool that they're able to do that inside of the same show, that they can do, those, morality tales, and it doesn't feel totally out of place. Like if you tried to
No, it didn't.
If you tried to go to, CSI and all of a sudden do a musical episode, or, it just wouldn't work, right? These are two very different styles of episodes. And, it works. In the broad scheme of the show, you can do both of those different types of episodes, and they both work.
Yeah, it didn't feel like it was a different show I was watching.
Yeah. That's what I like about this, is you can have an episode, or that's what I like about Star Trek, is you can have one episode where it's just all action and they fight the Borg, and then the next episode is,
it's versatile. You can tell a lot of stories with this format. Yeah.
You're not hemmed into it. Yeah. So
yeah. No, I just thought this one leaned a little too far in the action direction. And again, it's just not my cup of tea.
All right. Well, we've been talking for a while. That was season 1, episode 9. We'll be back next time for the series 1 finale, which, not to set the bar too high, is the highest rated episode of the season.
I'm looking forward to it. And again, I'm watching these episodes as we go. I have no knowledge of the episode before I watch it, right before we do the episode, right before we record the podcast. And I'm hoping for this one that we get some good Pike moments. We haven't had a lot for Pike to do in the last several episodes.
All right. Well, you're in for a treat.
Oh, good. Okay.
All right. We'll see you next time.
All right. See you then.